I swear he's not sticking his tongue out at you. You just put that right. It's okay. Yeah, you're special. Welcome back to a news of the day type video, and we're still waiting on news from the NHL. They're just watch pot never boils, that whole thing. Maybe I'll just go out around the block. If I leave the house, then something happens, right? So what they're discussing already, we're already getting into hype for next year. We're Raty, and I apologize for butchering that. I've listened to it over to Raty, and it's fine. I'm sure Pierre Maguire, if I say it enough times, Pierre Maguire will actually magically appear behind me and then tell me where he was born, where he grew up, who his best friends are, how to pronounce his name, whether or not he's got a really good stick. And then he won't leave, is my guess. Anyways, so really the hype around Raty is something simple. He could very well be the first Finnish player to be drafted number 1 overall. And he seems pretty level-headed. Did an interview on TSN with him. Seems very level-headed. Get the hype train started. He's going to be the number 1 pick next year, in all likelihood. And he should be an excellent player. Every draft year, we're going to see fantastic franchise-level players available. It's very rare that we don't. At least in recent years. Interesting article as well on Juuso Välimäki on Sportsnet, in that he likely doesn't make a return, and it may be for Seattle reasons. So last year he played, I think it was 24 games, hasn't played a game this season due to injury. He might be ready to come back from the play-in, he might not. It might be in the best interest of the Flames not to do it. If he doesn't play at all this year, that means that next year becomes his second year. And if a player has 2 years of experience in the NHL, they are ineligible to be drafted. They are exempt from the expansion draft. So that's his second year, and then he slides right through the expansion draft. And for Calgary, which defenseman they're going to protect, that gets interesting. And it becomes a situation where if they had to protect Välimäki, they might end up exposing Giordano, for instance. So again, as we get through whatever happens this year, whether we do or don't see a play-in, whether everything gets shut down or whatever happens, I'll be able to better speculate on what Seattle's going to have available to them after we start next season. And then the question mark becomes, so what if next season's threatened? Then what? So the NHL might have to get really creative at that point, and then maybe you circle back on Välimäki and go, on the other hand, he is available. So we'll see what the NHL does. I wanted to throw this in here. It's not hockey related, but it's something we talk about all the time. Bundesliga. It's working with the German government on the idea that next season they could have a 50% capacity in their crowds. So roughly 21,000 on average. Now, I think that with numbers being as they are in Canada, you could have events as soon as this fall. If the numbers continue to trend in the right direction, you could have attendance at games of maybe half. And that might save seasons for leagues like the CHL, for the BCHL, for any hockey league lower level. That could absolutely save them. They might have to jack up the ticket price a little bit to make up the difference, but I think that we would understand that, and it would probably be just for the psychological aspect. It would probably be kind of nice, and of course you're going to still maintain, all the things you have to in order to make sure that the numbers stay low. But they're low enough in Germany that they're actually looking at, and this wouldn't be until the fall, having a 50% capacity next season and having safety procedures in place to make sure that's done properly. So we'll keep an eye on what they're doing, because they were the first league to come back and say, we think we figured it out, and they did. It has been a very safe return for the Bundesliga. Now, in the midst of all the return talk, there's been talk of what we're going to see at the Olympics. So this is Sportsnet's team for Team Canada. This is the Scores Team USA. And one thing about how hockey has changed, Team USA is no longer really that much worse than Team Canada. We used to have it where Team Canada was great, and Team USA was probably 5th or 6th in the world. I would argue that Team USA could win gold in 2022. So we'll look at the rosters, and Sportsnet really doesn't like having wingers on Team Canada. It's almost all centers. First line would be Marchand, Crosby, and Bergeron. I'm going to throw out there, by the time we hit the 2022 Olympics, that's an older line. And that could potentially be an issue by then. And Bergeron on the wing, I guess, sure, fine. Second line, Barzell, McDavid, and McKinnon. I'm going to say right now that line would end up being the first line. That line would end up being the first line if that's how it worked out. Stamkos, Point, and Marner on the third line, and then the fourth line, Tavares, O'Reilly, and Stone. O'Reilly and Stone, I think, are very capable of being that fourth line shutdown player. I don't know that Tavares is a great fit there. And then the extras, they say, are Huberdeau and Scheifele. I honestly would probably have Scheifele in there instead of Tavares. Not because I don't like Tavares. I think Tavares is probably the better scorer. But if we're going to have somebody playing the wing and potentially a shutdown role, I would probably have Scheifele out there instead. We'll get into where I think there's some issues with this roster, though. On the blue line, they have Pietrangelo and Makar. The internet melted down at Makar being the first team, or first pair defense. Riley and Hamilton as the second pair. Theodore and Doughty as the third pair. And Morrissey and Shabbat as the extras. And Ottawa fans went nuts because Shabbat as the extra doesn't make any sense. I somewhat agree with them. I think Dougie Hamilton had a great year. I don't know that I would put him on Team Canada right now. I would switch Shabbat with Hamilton. Shabbat might end up being first pairing, and I might bump Makar down to second pairing with Riley. Because again, Cale Makar is still a kid. He's excellent, he's great talent. You don't want to put too much pressure on him at an Olympic stage. Price and Bennington as the goaltenders, and Hart as the number 3. And honestly, with the goaltenders, I didn't have any issue with that. But what about Jonathan Toews? Why not have Toews on this team as a fourth liner? I understand he's a little older now, but Toews he could be a great fourth line center for an Olympic team. Couturier, so you don't want to go as old as Toews? Okay, well, what about Couturier? I think Couturier absolutely deserves a spot. Claude Giroux, no sign of Claude Giroux. On the blue line, Chris Letang stands out as one that they didn't have on the board. Ryan Ellis, excellent defenseman. I might put Ellis in there over Doughty right now. Just saying right now. You can hate me in the comments if you want. Brent Burns. I know Burns has fallen in terms of his value with the hockey community, but I think the amount of criticism he takes is probably too much. And I think the reality is he's better than people give him credit for right now, this being an example. And Colton Parayko. Colton Parayko showed last year during the spring and summer, early summer, that he can be an excellent defenseman and he can play that shutdown role, and he would give them something that I don't think this blue line has. So that to me, those are the interesting ones. Now on Team USA's side, again, this is from the Score. They have Matthew Tkachuk, Austin Matthews, and Patrick Kane as a first line. That's fantastic. That's a fantastic first line. Second line, Gaudreau, Eichel, and Besser. I don't know that I would have Brock Besser on the second line. I would have Wheeler as probably second line and Besser on the third with Connor and Larkin. But think about that. That's your top 9. That is an excellent top 9. And then on the fourth line, they have Gensel, JT Miller, and DeBrincat. Now, DeBrincat didn't have a great year this year, but he has excellent talent, and he showed last year he can score 40 goals. Throw him with Gensel and JT Miller, and I'll tell you, there's going to be an energy line out there that can steal some games. Trocheck and Jack Hughes are the extras, according to them. I don't know that I'd have Jack Hughes on the extras, but we'll get to that. Krug and Carlson on the blue line. Werenski and Seth Jones on the blue line. That's where it gets interesting. I would have Werenski ahead of Krug, personally. Quinn Hughes and Slavin. And then the extras, they have McAvoy and Trouba. I like McAvoy more than Krug. I'm kind of surprised that they had Krug on the top pairing and McAvoy is not being in the lineup. So, yeah, that's an excellent blue line. No complaints there. And Annette Hellebuck and John Gibson. And then the third goalie would be Ben Bishop. So, yeah, American goaltending pretty solid. No sign of Jonathan Quick. And I don't know that even if you're a Quick fan, you can argue you should be there. On the what about list for me, I have Ryan Suter, Cam Fowler, Anthony DeAngelo. DeAngelo showed this year he has an amazing ability offensively, and he's great on the power play. Pacioretty, not on the list. Oshie's already proven he can be an American hero. Shootouts, right? So I find a way to get him on the team. I might bump DeBrincat out and put in Oshie. Kreider and Brady Tkachuk. What about a line where you have both Tkachuks on the wing for Matthews? And what that could do, right? So there's tons of things. I'm not saying you bump Patrick Kane down. Again, don't hate on me. I'm just saying there are a lot of things you could do with a Team USA now. It is a pretty deep overall roster for the Americans, and I'm glad. The stronger the Americans get, the more fun those games between the States and Canada are. Now, There were a lot of people who decided yesterday that I was talking too much regarding how, players only make this amount in their career. And really, we can't feel bad for these guys. Listen, making the National Hockey League at all is insanely difficult. So when I see people talking about, all these guys don't deserve their money, they should just be grateful. I remember when Patrick Kane got drafted, I think it was over $100,000 his parents had invested in him to get to the NHL draft in between all of the costs along the way. It is really expensive, and it is a lot of time, and it is a lot of effort, and it is a lot of working out. And we no longer have a league where during the off season players just take time off and they just go off and do whatever. So I tracked down an article from a few years ago, but I can't think this is any different now than it was then, where roughly 5% of junior players reach the NHL. And it's an ABC article from 2017. I will link it in the description below this video. And apparently they took it from Ken Campbell from the Hockey News. So, again, it's from 2017. It's not that long ago. And then they looked at the rosters and they said, all right, well, the top 18 players on each team. So there's usually 25-man rosters with your junior teams and your college teams. So 6.7% of those top 18 players on those rosters in the CHL and the NCAA. So they're just looking at CHL and NCAA. So that's your Western League, Quebec League, Ontario League, and then your various conferences in the NCAA. And yes, it was easier to get there if you're CHL than if you're NCAA. But still, it's 6.7%. Of the 113 that graduated to the NHL in this study they did, 29 became average or above average NHLers, 46 could be considered average NHLers, and 38 were below average or fringe players. So that means 29 players became stars in the NHL in that period in time. And it was 113 out of 2,428, I believe is the number. Again, I will link in the description because it's an interesting fact. So we get into this discussion of how much players make and how much they make during their careers, and there's lots of people, whatever. We just, and when I hear that, I think, okay, so we are going to completely throw dirt on the amount of sacrifice that players have made to get to the NHL. The fact that so many that in the effort to get to the NHL, they suffer shoulder injuries that destroy the rest of their professional careers, wherever they end up. There are plenty of players who just don't make it to the league and end up playing out in the ECHL or the AHL. And when we just throw dirt on the careers of these guys and we talk about, well, who cares? Why should I feel bad for them? And then the doctors thing gets thrown in, and I'm like, every time I see that, I think, well, that's a false equivalency, isn't it? That's not a right equivalency. So we compare professional athletes to doctors and nurses, which is fine. But I looked it up. I thought, you know what? There are some rich doctors as well. The number one doctor in terms of his overall wealth value, according to 2020, is Patrick Soon-Shiong, a doctor who is worth $13 billion. So yeah, there are doctors, there's 4 doctors, according to the list I found, that are worth $1 billion. So yeah, there are doctors who make a ton of money. And there are doctors who don't. But I find that weird that that's the equivalency. And there's a difference, too. I mean, with doctors, you go through school and you go through all this, and you study and you do well, and then you get your practice, and in some cases they do really well, and in some cases they don't. With hockey, you are starting as a young kid, and you are going through level after level after level, and at any one level, the dream can come to an end. And for many, many kids, it does. And a number I was looking for and I couldn't find was of kids who enter hockey at a young age, how many of them actually reach the NHL? Because it's been said, you have a better chance of winning Lotto 649 than you do of reaching the NHL if you're a young kid entering junior hockey. And I'm not talking about WHL. I am talking about, your very, very lowest tier of hockey. Right now we have players who are sitting out not knowing what's going to happen. We have players who are amongst the very best of the best in hockey, who have a very limited amount of time to make their money. Whereas doctors, they can work for 45 years. They can just keep working too. Plenty of doctors who can work past 65. And they do quite well for themselves. Hockey players, not always the case. So, I just find that really, really bizarre that we make that comparison and it gets thrown out there. So I wanted to answer that because, yeah, there are doctors who are worth a lot. Let me just go ahead and scroll through the list I found here. I can include this as well. Thomas Frist is worth $9.1 billion. Philip Frost is worth $4.9 billion. Gary Michelson's worth $1.6 billion. James Andrews is worth $100 million. He's the orthopedic surgeon. He's worked with WWE a lot, I believe. That's the one. Yeah, James Andrews is worth $100 million. So, yeah, they do well. The doctors do well for themselves. I think they do well for themselves. And at this time, there are certainly doctors who are performing their duty and they're heroes, and I'm not stating that they're not. I just find that weird. I've always found that equivalency weird. Yeah, but doctors, nurses, wait. What does that have to do with professional sports? Athletes make the amount of money they do because we provide that money to the league. Sponsors provide that money to the league. If you're going to games, if you're buying memorabilia, if you're doing, you are propping that up. You cause that value to go up. The $4.8 billion the NHL was going to make this year before the world came to an end, that $4.8 billion, I guess the argument then is, if we don't think that NHL players should make that amount of money, then it should all go to the owners. Well, the owners love this idea. If you want to go to a negotiation and argue against players making a minimum of $700,000 for being amongst the absolute best at what they do in the world, have at her. I find that a weird comparison to make. It's just bizarre. Because again, professional sports are a whole different ecosystem. Same as acting and the entertainment industry in general. It's completely different. And there are actors who make $20 million for 6 weeks of work. Hey, I'm doing a video. You just have some shame. No, have some shame. Don't you dare slap me. This is a serious topic. You just lay down. Don't stick your tongue out at me. It's a serious topic. So yeah, I just find that weird because I don't hear, whoa, this guy made $20 million for a movie. What about doctors? Bizarre. Maybe I don't follow those topics enough. Maybe there's all kinds of people telling The Rock he shouldn't get paid money for movies. It's weird. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. And hey, my argument's simple. Taking away this year and next year from players, it might be their last chance. And they've been playing for, we look at their NHL career. You've got to look at the 10 to 15 years preceding the NHL career of what it took to get there. It's their lifetime's work. So I respect that. I do. But let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.